Welcome, everyone. You're tuned into Cyber Pulse powered by Prophaze, the podcast where we turn bits and bytes into banter and data breaches into delicious dialogue. I'm Lakshmi, co founder of Prophaze, and joining me today is a very special guest, the one and only Frank Luzsicza, CEO of BlueInk Security. So, let me give a brief introduction about Frank. So Frank is a true powerhouse in cybersecurity field with over 2 decades of experience. He's worn many hats: practitioner, executive, founder, and three-time CEO of cybersecurity companies. Frank's a hands-on leader, board advisor, and a relentless champion of cybersecurity innovation. With deep technical roots in computer science and mathematics paired with an MBA, Frank brings a perfect blend of tech and business strategy into the table. Welcome, Frank.
Well, thank you so much, Lakshmi. Great to be here.
So, Frank, let me just ask you one interesting thing. I'm sure all of the viewers would want to know this. So, I would just want to know, so how did you come into the field of cybersecurity? So, was it passion or was it some other reason? And what do you feel are the gaps in the cybersecurity industry as of now?
So, thank you for asking the question. I don't get that question too often, but I got my start in cybersecurity many years ago, 25 years ago. So back when I think cybersecurity wasn't even a term we used, right? We would use IT security or certainly looked at IT risk as an element of risk management. But my start in cybersecurity was through application development. So I was studying and practicing as a software developer, as a software engineer, and had passion for building products, building software. And by chance, by luck, by fortune, I had the opportunity to actually work on a product that was for a cybersecurity problem. So it was a vulnerability management, one of the early concepts of vulnerability management as a SaaS product. Again, way back when. And through that development and understanding what vulnerabilities were and understanding how to prevent them or how to manage them, I developed a passion to work more closely in cybersecurity, and that sort of carried me through the rest of my career. As far as the gaps in the industry, I think the cybersecurity industry is doing a tremendous um, job in solving a very difficult problem. Right, we're in an industry where the the risk or the threat is constantly evolving. Yet we're developing tools, products, companies around solving that problem in real time. And so it's a race. It's a very fast and active race that I don't think creates many gaps, other than it creates maybe a delay. And so I think our challenge in our industry is to close that delay from emerging threats or emerging maybe technologies. AI obviously drives a lot of conversations today, um, and bridging that with effective security tools and technologies and services and solutions as an industry to ultimately stay ahead of the problem or stay at least in step with the problem. So I think that's our challenge. I wouldn't necessarily point at a product set or a or domain, but rather in general, what we're trying to do, I think, is a good fight, a very meaningful fight, but one that is a constant race and catch up with the bad guys.
Definitely. I mean, it's all about staying one step ahead of the bad guys, right? And with
Exactly.
all the AI and MLs coming into picture, we never know. We have to keep learning. We have to keep abreast of everything that's going around us, and obviously we'll have to fight with the same sword, right? Yeah, I completely agree. And 25 years, so you're celebrating your silver jubilee in cybersecurity. So that's indeed great. I'm sure the viewers would have definitely enjoyed hearing your insights, which has come from these 25 years, right? If that was the case, if I would want ask you, what would be the most interesting or or what would be the most challenging, you know, incident or something that happened that you still remember, you know, throughout, between these many years?
There are many examples of incidents, and my previous company was almost exclusively dedicated to breach investigations, digital forensics, and incident response. So we had, and my team had seen a lot of very difficult, complex incidents. However, the challenging ones are the ones that have the most devastating impact on the companies and the organizations that experience them, right? And when you see that impact, that leaves a mark, leaves a impression on, how do we do this better? How do we prevent this? How do we avoid this type of pain on organizations in the future? Which is exactly what we're doing currently with our company, BlueInk Security, is working hard to prevent those devastating breaches. But the impact sort of plays a role. So you look at breaches that have caused businesses to have to shut down, right? Where the demands of the ransom or the cost of the cleanup and restoration and remediation are just exorbitant, and companies can't recover from. Those are sort of the most impactful ones that you remember, and try to prevent.
So let's warm up with something a little different. If application and API security were a groundbreaking tech gadget, what would it be and how would it revolutionize the way we interact online?
Wow, that is a way to break the ice. So if you think of API security, it's really protecting the gateway into an application. However, if you extrapolate applications into devices and IoT and the things we see really proliferate our lives, API security becomes more than just protecting an application. It really protects devices, protects data exfiltration, right? So I would see API security evolve into really an add-on into devices, add-on into smart devices, add-on into IoT devices, and possibly even um, uh, industrial applications like SCADA devices, and essentially anything and everything that consumes data and network connectivity.
In your view, what's the most surprising misconception that people have about API security that could lead to serious vulnerabilities?
So I think the misconception, right? The most common misconception around API security or APIs in general is the fact or the lack thereof that the APIs are invisible, right? We develop APIs to expose functionality or to connect and integrate into other applications at other systems. And from a development standpoint, we sort of assume that they're invisible, they're not discoverable, no one's going to find them. And as a result, I think we take security a little bit less seriously than we would otherwise, right? When we publish applications on a web or publish web interfaces and so forth, it's obvious. We see them. They're physical. They're there. With APIs, they're a little bit invisible, and I think that's the major misconception, that there is really nothing there. No one's going to find it. It's okay if it's a little bit misconfigured or a little bit insecure, but that's really not.
So that was a great point and a perfect reminder, also that APIs are often backdoor for hackers. And if you're not securing them, then you're basically inviting them to your party, right? And nobody likes party crashers, right? So, yeah. So, Frank, what's one emerging threat that keeps you up?
So, an emergent threat, I think, across the API landscape. There are a lot of things that, first of all, that keep me up at night, in terms of threats. But in terms of emerging threats with APIs, I think it's the much like the shadow IT in the world of IT infrastructure and networks and sort of deploying technology. I think there is a concept of shadow API, which are the APIs that are maybe forgotten or that are deployed during development for testing or running certain routines, and then they're undocumented. They're not the primary focus of the deployed application, and so they sort of get forgotten and missed in the cycle of development. So it's that sort of open door that you don't know, right? That I think is one of those invisible risks that keeps a lot of us up at night, and discovering those and finding those is a real effort after you've deployed a certain application already to production.
Definitely. So it's the key thing here is API discovery, because there would have been a lot of developers who might have added their bits of API and all of that for their ease of coding, right? So it's all about
Mhm.
figuring out how many API endpoints are there, and trying to secure all of them, right? So yes, so I definitely agree to that point, and that's a solid strategy. So now let's talk about the human element in cybersecurity. So Frank, so how do you think human error, contributes to security breaches? After all, we are all humans, right? So
Yeah, and I think this is a general statement, but obviously human error, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is one of the larger risks contributed to cybersecurity in general, right? Not just API, not just applications, but in general. And I think you have to really take the time to understand what causes that human error, because it's not as simple as let's have a policy or let's have some education, let's enforce or let's punish or do things to try to prevent the obvious, but really understanding what causes that human error to contribute to either misconfigurations or bad application code or poorly documented APIs or whatever the outcome is, right? So understanding the causes of that human error, and then really building a what we like to call a security culture, right? And an understanding and appreciation for the risk, so that people take proactive action to prevent some of those errors. I think is the only realistic solution. But it is a major contributor, as you say, Lakshmi, big contributor to I think a lot of the vulnerabilities. But it's not quite as simple as let's punish those who made the error and they'll never make it again. Chances are that's not going to work. But establishing a culture of visibility, a culture of accountability, a culture of appreciation for the risk, I think can lead to some meaningful improvement in that human error.
definitely. So, as we all know, I mean, sometimes humans can be the weakest link, right? It's all about how we can generate that sense of security awareness, so that everybody thinks that security starts from them and they own it up, right? Otherwise, obviously, to err is human and to forgive is divine, but we cannot always be there, to accept all the errors that because it might cost the companies a huge blank out or whatever. So now let's tackle something that might sound a bit dry, but still is super important, right? Regulatory compliance. So how can organizations balance compliance without with innovation without feeling that they are like stuck in a bureaucratic maze? I think this is very relevant to these, in
Wow.
organization.
Um, it is very relevant. I think you're right. There's certainly a tendency to sort of lose sight of what's important in a compliance driven environment or industry, or right when that is the top of mind, or that's the top priority. There's a tendency to sort of lose sight of how does it fit in. And so I would put it this way. I would like to say that you have to treat compliance as a baseline rather than a ceiling when it comes to building your security program, right? Your end goal isn't to be compliant. Your end goal is to use something that is proven, that is well developed, that creates a foundation of methodology or foundation of understanding of risk or other elements to really take advantage of, to build a solid foundation, a solid baseline. And then from then understanding, now what are the gaps to our security posture? What are the gaps to our applications that we're building? And then build a security program or DevOps workflows or the embedded technologies to fit your specific risk posture. Again, using compliance as your foundation, as your framework, as your driver, but not necessarily as a ceiling to not become an overburden, but rather a guiding principle in your security program.
Definitely. I mean, it's all about getting the security posture right. And sometimes people, get tied up, when the whole, the bureaucracy is there above them. I mean, they might want to, implement a lot of things with, actually can enhance the security posture, but sometimes they might be tied up. So which because of which they cannot implement the things that have to be implemented, right? So anyways, I think it's all about how we can get the organizational structure right and give them the necessary actions and things that they can take act on it, right? So now let's just switch gears. It's time for a game called hack or whack. I'll say a cybersecurity practice, and you'll have to tell me if it's a good strategy, whether it's a hack or a bad one. So, well, it's a whack. So, I hope you're ready for some fun.
Sure, let's go.
Great. So, the first one is so if you're using password 123 because you think no one would guess something so obvious.
Wow. Yeah, so yeah, definitely whack. I think that the password has to be more intelligent than 123. Obviously, today we have multi-factor authentication and all kinds of other techniques to rotate and to drive a better password hygiene. But yeah, to assume that because you used a password so obvious that no one will guess it, no, definitely not a good idea.
Yeah, so might as well write your password and sticky note and paste it on your laptop, right? Next would be regularly updating API documentation. Will it be a hack or a whack?
Yeah, I mean, definitely hack, right? I mean, good idea. By all means, documentation in general is a good idea. However, right, you want to be mindful of who the audience is for the documentation, because sometimes the documentation of your architecture, your security controls, your sensitive information can be as revealing or even more revealing than doing a scan of your environment. So documentation, great idea, but security controls around where that documentation is stored, who has access to it, where it's published, where it's not published, also very, very important factors.
So yeah, so definitely clear documentation helps your development team and anyone maintaining security. So it's like keeping a clean house, right? So the final one will be relying solely on perimeter security for your application. Will that be a hack or a whack?
Parameter security, obviously, the right the right starting point, but not enough. Not enough. Just like in network infrastructure and network security, perimeter was always sort of the starting point to understand, where some of the largest threats were. But same with application security. At the perimeter, you really just understanding the surface, and going beyond that through access control, through privileged access, through really threat detection, and understanding what happens beyond that perimeter and building layers of security. Same issue with network infrastructure, also important with applications. So definitely not enough.
So that was a good attempt, Frank. So thank you for that. And with that, we are coming to the end of this wonderful session. So as we wrap up, Frank, what's your advice for companies looking to secure their applications and APIs as we move on to 2025? So what should they be focusing on?
So good question in general, right? I think in general the core areas to focus on is visibility and control, right? You have to have visibility into not only the inventory or the assets or what's out there, but also the behaviors, the actions, the activities to be ultimately able to determine what is and what isn't nefarious versus benign behavior. So that's visibility. Um, I think control is the other part that is so critical, and you hear about technologies like zero trust and sort of the technologies that exclude everything, but rather only allow the specific permitted activities and applications. I think those are the right mechanisms for control, but there are many others, like the encryption of the content, encryption of data, obviously at rest, but also in transit. the threat intelligence detection of the threats in real time, and then applying the control mechanisms to allow the behavior that is benign effectively filter out the false positives and so forth. Again, going back to two very basic, very key principles: visibility and control. I think those are the most important to focus on as sort of we look at API security into 2025.
That's great. So I would just pick up these keywords, visibility and control, right? So I hope that we've been able to embed these two things mainly into our viewers. Frank, so it's been absolute pleasure having you on the show today. Any final words before we let our listeners get back to their digital lives?
Yeah, so there's one thing I wanted to maybe to leave you with, and that is, I think security is really a journey. It's not a one time sort of solution, one time fix. So we have to stay vigilant and informed, and essentially recognize that proactive security or managing our security posture really becomes an ongoing investment in our organizations, and it's really an investment into resilience, into our future resilience. So as we think of security and security solutions, we have to sort of stop ourselves from falling into a trap of this being a one-time fix, but rather a journey that we take as an organization to both adopt a security culture, but also build security into our organization to maintain or to strengthen our future's resilience.
So, with that, I'd say it's all about going back to the basics, strong authentication, regular code reviews, and not just treating security like an afterthought. And for all our listeners who are just getting started, don't be afraid. Just ask for help or invest in the right tools because it's a lot easier than trying to clean up after a breach. I hope all of you would agree. And before we wrap up, I would request all of you to get that curve on your face upright because that's the only thing that can get things straight for not just you but all the people around you. So stay charged, stay smiling. And with that, it's me, Lakshmi, signing off from today's Cyber Pulse. So thank you. And thank you, Frank, for being there on our show. It was really wonderful to have you at our show. And I'm sure the viewers would have definitely got a lot of insights from all of the information that you shared with all of them. So thank you once again. It was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Lakshmi. Thanks for having me.